My name's Dean, and I'm your host. You're listening to The Non-Typical Project. Cooler than me. All right, so hailing out of the great state of Michigan, guys, we've got DJ Riley. DJ is a husband, a father, host of Latitude's The Method podcast, and of course, one hell of a bow hunter. DJ, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to me for you to come on and do the Non-Typical Project.
Dude, I appreciate you having me on, Dean, and thanks for the intro too. I mean, there was a whole list of things, but the list of things that you just said about me, what I appreciate a lot of that is that like hunting came towards the end, and that's kind of how I stack the importance in my life. Being a good husband, being a good dad, things like that. So I appreciate that, but I want to give you kudos to something real quick. When I first seen that you started a podcast and I seen the name Non-Typical, it would have been very easy to like, oh, he named it after his favorite kind of whitetail, or he maybe shot a big non-typical, so he just called it Non-Typical. And when I first listened to one of your intros about why the podcast is named Non-Typical, I was like, well played. I really like that route. And for anyone listening right now, I'll try to explain it and then tell me if I'm wrong. Is you named it the Non-Typical because of the non-typical methods and styles of how guys can kill whitetails all across the country, or maybe even more than whitetails. But when I heard that, I was like, dude, I like that. Well played, buddy.
I appreciate it. And, a big part of it was like, I was like, I want to talk to those people that I feel like kind of hunt to their own style and their own method, and like to your podcast name, like the
Mhm.
method. But at the same time, it's these people that are always doing something a little bit different. Those are the guys that I find the most relation to, and the guys that I find are getting it done the most consistently because they're not falling into a pattern. They're doing things a little
Mhm.
bit off beat. And I love those stories, the guys that were like, yeah, this is gonna sound kind of crazy, but it worked. I'm like, let's
Mhm.
go. Those are the
Yep.
conversations I love. And once I kind of came to that name, I was like, okay, there's like 100 different ways I see this working too, because um, that non-typical buck, the outline of the antlers is that non-typical I took in
Mhm.
October of 2017. And that buck is always the center of conversation when somebody comes into my office. I
Mhm.
got a bunch of great bucks on the wall, but he's the conversation starter. So I'm like, yeah, that's gonna be it for the podcast.
Yeah, no, I like it, man. Like I said, the first time I heard it, I was like, dude, I like the route because, like you said, you brought up, the podcast that I host, The Method, and I talk a lot about how guys have so many different methods of killing or just hunting in general, or their different methods of scouting, where it's like, man, the more people you talk to in this space, bow hunting whitetails, whether it's public land or private land, you just truly learn that there's so many different ways to skin this cat. And you have guys that'll be, really good at one thing, and as wild it is that it sounds to us, we're like, man, you tried that, and they're like, yeah, I've killed 4 big whitetails doing that. And it's like, dude, that's impressive. Or then you have guys that just seem extremely adaptable and well-rounded and kind of go out there and
Mhm.
kill them in any different way, and it's like, man, that's awesome too. Where it's like you just learn where there's guys killing big whitetails across the entire country in like hundreds of different ways, and even in states that aren't supposed to have big deer, where it's like, man,
Yeah.
I love all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to give you credit too. A big reason that this all started when it did was shortly after you had me on the method.
Hmm.
And it's been something that my friends were absolutely sick of me, because I've been talking about like, yeah, I want to do like a podcast, or I want to do, video stuff, or I want to get into hunting media one way or another. And I kind of ran into this block of like always stopping myself almost. Like
Hmm.
there was no obstacle in my path as big as myself. And a big part of it was I was sitting back like, I haven't gone out of state yet, so, what am I gonna do? If I punch 2 tags in Missouri, that's it, it's 2 videos, so what am I gonna do? Upload 2 YouTube videos a year where I get a buck down or something? And then it was, well, if I do a podcast, like, who wants to hear from me, who wants to do whatever? And after you had me on the method, the amount of folks that reached out to me afterwards was
Hmm.
super eye-opening, and so then from that on, I was like, it kinda took that little layer fear, I guess, back where I was like, maybe I can, share something that people like to hear. So it's been, that was kind of the thing that tipped me over the edge where I was like, yeah, I want to start something and see how it goes. So I got to give you a lot of credit for that. I really do appreciate you having me on. It changed a lot for me as far as getting into all the hunting media stuff goes and just finally cutting that rope. And when I told my friends, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm starting it, this week or whatever. And I'm going to start uploading some of these videos and doing some of this stuff. They were like, oh, like now it's happening. I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's what it took, really.
Yeah. Now that deer season's over with, now we can start the new project, right? That's how it works. But no, man, no problem at all. I'll tell you what, I can remember it's funny because in the hunting podcast space, there's guys that seem to, do a lot of podcasts. And I have buddies that do a lot of podcasts and man, they're great killers and whatnot. But man, I have like this special part of me that or something inside me that like there's guys, say when it comes to social media, because I didn't know you outside of social media at all. And a lot of times it just takes one caption, and how a guy maybe writes his story up or whatever. And a lot of times it doesn't have to necessarily be a certain caliber of animal for me, but I love to find guys that haven't been on a ton of podcasts, true DIY style guys. They could be hunting public or private. It doesn't really matter to me. But like when I sense that, like, man, that deer in that picture is earned, and I can tell like that guy is jacked about that deer he's behind right now. I am like I will reach out to so many of those guys, and I don't care if they say, "Man, it's my first podcast" or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. So I think it's awesome that you started this up. But I'll tell you, man, just from the couple years of experience I've had from doing it, and I'm sure you are this way too, is just be a sponge, man, because you're gonna listen and get to talk to guys that if you're a sponge and you're open minded, and even though you've been successful out in the woods and put some big deer on the wall, there's so much more to be learned out there, and just always staying that student of the game. So when when you have those guests on, man, soak that in. And two, that I think the most like important thing for me doing all these podcasts has been is building these relationships along the way, right? Kind of what you referenced to right there. Like I had you on mine, and since then we've talked quite a bit off
Yep.
record since you've been on there, and we may bounce ideas off each other. Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what do you think about that? We're like, dude, there's been things out there that have it's opened up my eyes. It's made me look at the woods differently and certain types of terrain. And like I'll give full credit to I had a guest on one of my he's a good buddy now. I consider him a good buddy. His name's Dylan Hazen. And I'll never forget, for some reason, he said this line during this podcast and it stuck with me, and I don't know why, but it just did. And during that podcast, he said, sometimes once it gets later into the rut, DJ, he says, I'll eventually kind of not give up on sign, but I will start hunting terrain more than sign itself in hill country. Well, I can't remember what month I had him on. It was probably coming up into these winter months that we're about to hit, February, March, April, somewhere in there. Well, that following fall, I ended up on a out of state public land hill country style hunt, and I'm looking at the map, and I haven't stepped foot in this place yet, and I'm looking at the map, and I'm thinking about what he's saying about the sometimes I push the sign, it's not as high as an importance than it is terrain, as the rut, and it's November 16th, and it's midday, and I'm thinking about what he's saying. I'm looking at the map. I'm like, this is the spot that I feel like what Dylan's talking about makes sense. If I'm gonna just dive into a spot strictly off a train, not worrying about sign, just a train based hunt, mid to late November, this is it. And that night I killed a really big public land buck that night. And it's like, I don't, like, would I have done that? Not hearing him say that line, I'll never know. But that's something that has always stuck with me, but that goes from every podcast. Like I have this notebook that I'll write down about things that like one line things that guys say, and I may shorten it up just for something that I can reference back to. But it's man, there's a lot to learn, and if you're, as long as you're open minded, and, always wanting to be a student of the game, dude, it's a fun route to take.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you bring it up too because that's the sort of thing that like I gravitate towards because regardless of the amount of bucks I have put on the wall or anything I've done up till now, I never consider myself God's gift to bow hunting, and I don't care
Mhm,
how many deer I get up on the wall. It's one of those things that every season I try to go into it, and I'll literally sit there and have like a little reset with myself, like, okay, you're a freaking dummy and we need to make you not a dummy by the end of it. Like I try to start back at square one every time. Like I won't if I wanted to, I would try to ride the laurels of the buck I took in September all the way through the next year and the next year, but I kind of have to give myself that reset. And I'm sure you have a similar system that I do. I think most of us that hunt do. I've got a group chat of all my buddies I hunt with and all that stuff. And I'll sit there and any time I get frustrated with the deer or anytime that I'm, faced with a new challenge, I'm on the phone with my friends. I'm in a group chat and we're able to kind of pull and it's almost like I consider most of the deer I take like team deer. Like it was a
mm,
team kill because we sit there and we talk it through and usually like we're sharing pins doing whatever we can and then oftentimes if I'm having trouble breaking something down someone else will be like have you looked over here yet or like what does this
mhm,
look like and we're able to kind of reflect through that and I just kind of take that all in because I really think it's one of those things where if you stop kind of pulling from what everyone else is trying to show you, or if you stop pulling from, you know, kind of unexpected sources, you kind of stop your progression a lot. Like it's hard to get better if you're sitting back and, you're dismissing maybe some of the people that you're seeing online or whatever. I'll stop and listen to anybody if they've got something to say about bow hunting
mhm.
because well, it doesn't matter, what their resume looks like or anything else the opportunity you have to learn from people, especially across the country, is one of the things I've learned too. People that hunt different places than me, the things that I've gotten to learn from those folks has been a massive game changer in how efficient I've been able to be. And it's just from taking all that information in. You can't have too much information when it comes to bow hunting whitetail. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, 100%, man. I agree with that completely. And the big thing there too is that the part that you have to find balance in, or it has to resonate with how you actually are hunting also, so listening to a guest of yours or whatever the case may be is so you're listening to them, but then you got to ask yourself, do they hunt like, are they hunting similar to me? I think a lot of how you and I hunt are probably pretty similar. Now a guy that owns 1,000 acres of private land, and he's sitting in on a food plot or wherever the case may be. Now he's done work to be able to have those opportunities, but those opportunities are going to be a lot different than my opportunities. So I had a guest on. He talked about a lot is like, you got to know the context of what you're listening to or what you're reading beforehand. And then, like, say if it is a guy, let's say if it's yourself and I'm listening to Dean talk, and maybe we hunt very similar, but obviously we hunt completely different states and different properties. So then it's taking what Dean says and then applying it to your own situation. You know what I mean? So it's not going to
Yeah.
be exactly the same, but maybe he talks about, in hill country that there's this hard vegetation edge. Well, even though I hunt swamp country, like there's those hard edges out there. And maybe the way is explaining how two vegetation edges come together becomes an inside corner. Well, I could find that in the swamp too, so things like that, where
For
you got to
sure.
kind of pick what it is. But you nailed it though. Just listening to everyone, having that open mindset, and just being a sponge, man. There's so much out there to learn, but you just got to remember, you got to be able to apply the stuff to your own situation, though, too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's something that, you have to kind of pick up on is one thing that I actually learned from some buddies that go out west to hunt was they'd say, like everything's flat as a pancake and you've got miles and miles and miles of like no massive features, but when they like take a topographical map or something like that, they can find like a small shelf or a
Mhm.
small dip and the deer are relating to that line. And there's actually a property not too far from where I live that is notorious for being very, very difficult to hunt. It is loaded with magnum deer.
Mhm.
160, 170 class deer are taken out of there every year, but it is notorious for being difficult to hunt, and because of that, it's basically like a Q-tip box, the whole property is. It's a
Mhm.
whole bunch of, like, really small woody vegetation as far as the eye can see, but the whole property is very flat.
Mhm.
And if you get to talking to some of the people that are known to kill out of there and take big bucks, they're like, "Yeah, there's a small dish that I'll focus in on. There is a small little change that you can't even really hardly tell unless
Mhm.
you're right on top of it." And they're like, "Those little small edges, for whatever reason, the deer on that property relate to it, and that's where they end up taking it from." And it's like, you can take that same information from out west and apply it to Missouri here, and to a property that's not plains country, it's heavily wooded, it's very thick, but because of the actual features of terrain that it's so flat, those little small dishes are still the edges that those deer, relate to. So, like, taking that stuff and just translating it however you need to apply to your situation is the biggest factor out of all of it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this without giving away too much information about the property or anything like that. Is it the the smaller stem style count of habitat in there? Is it because it's so flat? What is in your opinion? Why is it such a hard place to hunt? Just out of curiosity.
So the reason that it's so hard to hunt is it's high stem count, woody vegetation. It's almost like I honestly don't know what kind of tree it is.
Hmm.
I would almost like a little bit smaller than like a willow.
Hmm.
But they're all about maybe 3-inch thick trees, and it's just scattered throughout that entire property. Like, you have to walk sideways through those trees.
Mm.
So it's
Is it
really
because
thick
is
stuff.
is it because they're immature still, or is it just the species of tree itself?
That's just a species of tree. I mean,
Mm.
they're a lot of them are, 10, 11, 12 foot tall, and the
Hmm.
whole property is that way. Now, the big thing about this property too is it's very if it gives it away, it gives it away. If you figure it out off of this, then you probably know about it already. It's the property is very oval shaped. Like, it's an
Hmm.
oval shaped property, and it is so back before Onyx was a thing. It was a property that was notorious for people getting lost on it all the time.
Mm.
People would get lost. They would get turned
Hmm.
around because you don't have logging paths, you don't have, field edges, you don't have
Hmm.
crop fields, there is nothing there. It's literally just this woody stuff everywhere. So you walk, what should be a mile straight shot, and it might take you 4 miles trying to dodge and weave your way through all this woody vegetation, and it's all flat as a pancake, and good luck figuring out, where your next, point is. So
Mm.
before actually, I had a family member get lost out there one time. Calls my dad up, and he's like, "I'm so turned around, I can't find my way off this place." And, he's like my dad told him, he's like, "Look up at the sky," you
Mhm.
know, and he goes, "Walk in the direction the planes are coming from."
Mm.
And so that was the way he found his way back to the edge of the property where he can finally, figure out how to get back to his access point. So it's pretty interesting that that property in general, how it lays out. I haven't hunted it in a number of years. I'd love to, but
Mhm.
access is extremely difficult and you need to have the right equipment. So unfortunately, I'm not in that position right now, but, if I were to find somebody that had equipment that would wanna go run that property with me, I would definitely do it. It's super cool, and the class of deer it can grow for not having any food plots on it is really, really impressive.
Yeah. Well, a couple things here. One, the advice your dad gave, that's probably advice from someone that's been lost themselves. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah.
if you talk to your dad, you're like, how did you even think of that? He's like, well, I was lost one time and I had to figure it out, um, there's a couple things I want to hit on that. What I find interesting is, you brought up the fact that, yeah, man, this property, it produces big deer. And it's like the more I've played this game in, size of these pieces of property don't always matter, where it's like the harder they are to hunt. And that doesn't always have to mean because the elevation is so high and the hills are so big, but just it could be man, it's so tough just to access the property. It's so tough to get in and out of there without blowing it up. Or like you said, it's so tough to, people get lost and there's no real hard edges. There's no like defined things. The more I hear people talk about that, the more to me it makes sense that big deer are calling those places home, right? Because they're surviving in there.
For
I had
sure.
a place like that in Michigan this year where it was like scouting and it was like, man, I don't know if you can get in or out of here, but I remember telling my wife, I was like, "But that's exactly why one would live in there, because I don't know everyone that's hunting it, if you don't get away with it getting in there, you'll never kill one, you know?" So, like, when I hear a property like that, it like, how you say, "Man, but it produces big deer, it's just tough to hunt," where it's like, yeah, that's exactly why that sucker's producing big deer, but the another point I wanted to hit on is you talked about maybe to have a little bowl or a little rise or something like that is I still find it very interesting that we have more technology than ever today with all the mapping apps, the Onyx, the Spartan Forge, the Google Earth, the CalTOP, all the things, and then you got we can change the leaf off imagery, and we can go to lidar, we can go topographical maps, but I still see in Michigan, I see this a lot because you're pretty flat, and then a property like you're talking about right now, this describes it to a T in my mind for me still, is that all of that technology, but there's still places that I still believe there's still some of these the spot within the spots that can still only be found by lacing your boots up. Where
Absolutely.
maybe just the smallest bowl in there that you can visually see it while you're standing in there looking at it. But then you open up your map and you go through each of the settings, each map, each topo map, each lidar map, and you're like, I don't see this at all. And then it's like, to me, there's still like the spots within the spots. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff to be read out there on the maps, a lot of stuff. But boy, they're some of the most deadliest spots across the country. I still feel like our spots that it is because a guy laced his boots up and went in there and walked and checked it out. Because I do that a lot. You go in there and go scouting and you're dropping a pin here or there and you get back home and maybe you're having a cold beer or whatever. And then you bring out the map again and you're looking at it on a computer and you got your phone and you're looking at the pins and you're like, man, it doesn't make a lot of sense on the map, but when I find stuff like that, it makes me excited now because it's like, okay, this may be a little not a hidden secret, but like there's something here that a guy's not going to pick up from the map, But and then one last thing about a piece of property like that, but unfortunately, it doesn't sound like it because I brought up the question of is the tree species that itself, or are they just immature? Or a place that can be hard to hunt like that with not much, elevation change, not much hard edges. The one thing I've also found that can really change a place like that is one or two big deadfalls that fall, say in the off season, that may change the travel or force those deer to do something. Where I got a property in mind, I can think about right off the top of my head that it's like if you walked it, you'd be like, "Man, DJ, I don't really think there's much." And then you're like, "Well, you see how this deadfall is here compared to this deadfall?" And I'd say put a camera up there. You might be pretty surprised what ends up having to come through there because of that. But unfortunately, it just I don't. It sounds like that piece of property may not be able to justify something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that property is, that one's tough, and in Missouri here, too, we can't run any cameras on public, which I think is
Mm,
actually, um I found it well, you depends on the property. So,
mhm.
uh, to my understanding of it, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take my advice on this, but, to my understanding of the regulations, anything owned by the Missouri Department of Conservation is no trail cameras. Federally owned property might fall under different rules, but rule of thumb in Missouri is if it's public, no cameras. If
Mm.
it's private, go for it.
Man,
Now,
I didn't know that. I know Kansas
yeah,
was on that bandwagon because 'cause I've been out to Kansas a few times, and I don't have an issue at all not being able to do the trail camera thing like that, but I don't know, like, you heard everyone talk about Kansas about it. I haven't heard anyone talk about Missouri about it, so, I think it's cool
yeah,
though, man. I don't have a
yeah.
problem
So
with it.
I think it's cool. Now, obviously, if you go out to public land in Missouri, are you gonna find cameras? Yes. Yeah, I
Yeah.
found like 40 of them this year. It is what it is. But I think it helps a ton because I think a majority of your guys aren't running those cameras. because they don't wanna get that ticket, and especially now too, I've gotten to talk to a couple different folks at some of the bigger trail camera companies, and
Mhm.
they're like, "Yeah, game wardens will find them now and just walk up behind them and take a picture of the QR code that is
Mm.
on all those cameras and you register it to your app." They're
Yep.
like, they never know their camera got opened up. They're able to go right underneath that little motion detector, flip open that door from behind it, take a picture of it, and then they know your address, they know your billing address, all that stuff because 'cause they're gonna get the customer information. They're like, "There's an illegal so
Smart.
I'm sure there's plenty of guys getting door knocks, from putting cameras out. But, one of the things that is pretty cool about that is I think honestly it helps me, when I'm going out to a property because it kinda forces me to say, like, to not rely on a camera. It forces me to
Mhm.
not say, "Okay, well, is something coming through here or not?" If I wanna find out, now I go hang an observation sit or I go glass and glass and glass. And, honestly, it surprised me a lot in season when I was making those longer sits, what all is coming through that area because I have no idea. I know about my target bucks that I found over the summer, but I had a couple sits this year where I was like, "I didn't even see this deer through glassing or through anything
Mhm.
else," and it kinda gave me something to look forward to because I'm like, "I know what buck I'm trying to kill, but if something else comes through here, I'm all about it," like, it leaves that little bit of, excitement in me still, so that's been a big benefit to not running cameras on public, I think,
Yeah.
so that's been great.
My thoughts on trail cameras have changed a lot over the years, Dean. I mean, just a real ton. Like honestly, they've changed a lot. And I would say 10 years ago, even probably 5 or 6 years ago, if you said, yeah, I have 14 trail cameras, I'd be like, dude, you gotta get all 14 out. They don't let them sit in your basement. You got to be using them. Where now every year I find myself there's more and more trail cameras that stay down in the basement that never make it out into the woods. Now here in Michigan, I cannot promise you on every piece of property I hunt, there's going to be a deer that I'm looking to kill. So that is one thing for sure is that usually like I'll put a camera out on every piece of property that I'm hunting in Michigan just to verify like is there an animal that I would like to target here or is there not? Because the reality is there just always isn't. But it's going out of state the last couple of years I haven't really been using trail cameras, and it's really opened up my eyes, and that's why I think it's changed a little bit for me back in Michigan, where it's like, you know, I think it's so easy. Anyone that's ran a trail camera, I think you could very easily argue this. Anybody that's ever ran a trail camera has gotten married to it and it has hung them up in some way. Maybe they still killed that animal, but maybe they would have killed them at a quicker rate than what they did. Maybe they would have killed them the first week instead of the sixth week of the season, something like that. And I always thought I was pretty good about not getting married to them, but then man, when I started traveling out of state, it was like finding deer, getting on deer, and getting opportunities quick. And it was like I'm not using trail cameras. I'm just reading, the here and now. So I've kind of adapted that same kind of thing to my game in Michigan, where I still want to know if there's a target around, but I don't care to have a whole place littered because say if I look at the bucks I've killed over the last decade, I haven't killed any of those over top of a camera yet. Like that hasn't happened, where it's like I don't know. It's great for inventory and maybe great for some historical data. I do enjoy that. Like I do still seriously throwing out in like a regular SD card camera in a spot that I may be prospecting for next year on a new piece of public land. And man, there's a funnel here. Let's see when the funnel gets hot just for the future, future knowledge. But man, my thought has changed a lot on it. My thought has changed a lot on it. We went on a hunting trip this year. I had a cameraman this year, and he asked me, he's like, "Do you have any? We gonna put any trail cameras out?" And I said, "Well, I have one in my backpack, but I'll never forget. I said, you got to make a promise to me though." And he said, "What's that?" I said, "If we hang this on this trip, there's no emotional attachment to it. Like we don't get extremely happy just because of what's on it, and we don't get extremely mad because what's not on it. Like we can't do that. It's like extra baggage. I in my
Yeah.
opinion."
Yeah, for sure. I think it's something too that, like, not being able to hang those cameras on those, conservation properties I think it made me better at scouting because
Mhm,
I did you can't get lazy, you know, I can't say, "Oh, well, this field edge or this funnel or this creek crossing or whatever looks good. Let me hang that up and get out of here." I spent a ton of time scouting this year. I mean, I was rolling around every day after work, and that's all I was doing and glassing, and it's like, if I would have known that I had a camera hanging somewhere, would there have been more days where I just said, "Ah, I'll just, check the cameras when I get home," or, "Oh, I'm not gonna
mhm.
go roll around in glass." Probably. I'd be willing to bet that I probably would have kind of been a little bit lazier in my scouting, knowing that
Mhm.
I could just pop cameras up on a property.
Oh, dude, I agree with that 100%. I'm not agreeing that we're like, "Oh, yeah, Dean's gonna be more lazy because of it." But what you're saying, let me tell you this story. I had a conversation with a guy on a podcast about this. He caught my attention on he made some kind of social media post, and I already knew the guy, but he talked about that he didn't have a problem with trail cameras, but he was getting away from all cellular trail cameras and just going back to all SD card cameras, and I was
Mm,
like, "Okay." I was like, I'd love to hear your take on it." And what I'm about to say is what he was explaining to me. It made so much sense to me, and it kind of overlaps with what you said about, well, maybe I just get a little bit more lazy because of my cell camera is going to tell me what I need to know. Where this was his thought, and he had seen it firsthand, and I think he'd killed a buck because of it that year. Was the whole concept of putting a cell camera out is to not have to go back out there, right? Like, you put it
yep.
out there, now you don't have to intrude or anything like that. The biggest benefit I ever thought of a cell camera was just my time itself. It wasn't about the intrusion or anything like that. It was about the time. But his was about the intrusion. And he was talking about it as he said, "Man, I'd put these cell cameras out, and it was like I wouldn't go back in those areas because I was kind of letting the cameras tell me what was going on." And he's like, "But," he said, the funds didn't allow me to have all cell cameras, so I had some SD card cameras too." And he said, "Man, I had to go in, and it was sometime in October, and I had to go check those SD card cameras." Well, while he was going in there to check those SD card cameras, just off those cameras, man, he's like, there was a bunch of sign there, and it was like, "Holy shit, man!" And maybe I should try hunting this and end up killing a buck right there, Dean. And then so he looked back at it. He was like, having to go out there and check those SD card cameras was forcing me to scout my way in and way out of where that camera was. Where he's like, he goes, and it made me think, how many times are my cellular trail cameras out there, and within a 50-yard or 100-yard radius is a lot of sign that's being laid down, but that camera just simply ain't picking it up, but you're just relying solely on that camera just to tell you everything that's going on there. And it was like, dude, that makes a ton of sense, because you gotta remember, back in the day, we were always going out there and checking those cameras, right? Probably checking
Yeah,
them too much, but when we were doing that, we were seeing what was going on in the woods. Like, we'd seen every time, like, dude, this scrape wasn't here when I checked this 3 weeks ago. Now it's here. Oh my gosh, look at the track that's in it. That thing looks like it was made yesterday. Where like those older SD card cameras forces guys to be out in the woods. And when you're out in the woods, you're looking, because the reality is, I mean, September, October, like, I think of those 2 months, those freaking woods are changing every day out there. If you go hunting
absolutely.
on a Sunday, then you don't go hunting until, like, that Thursday. Dude, during that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, those woods change. The foliage is dropping, the leaves are dropping, whitetails are laying down sign. Like, dude, a lot's changing. So his philosophy behind it, I thought that made a lot of sense, dude. And it made me really think about, that real comparison of, even though we all thought that we were putting a ton of pressure on ground checking SD cards, and I'm sure we were at times, but it was like, dude, we were reading all the sign all the time, all the time. We weren't just relying on something that's giving us such a small glimpse of what's actually going on out there.
Yeah, so one of the things that was really interesting to me about that, right, with where deer can be in a small radius. I went into this season with the idea that I'm gonna pop cameras up on my permission properties, because they're all 12 acres or smaller, and some
Mhm.
of them are, 4 or 5 acres. So I'd pop a camera up where I felt like I'm catching a majority of the sign or the majority of the movement, or, I've got a mock scrape over here that's been super active. So I'm gonna pop a camera up in front of that. And heck, the property's only 5 acres. So odds are if deer move through, they're gonna move through there. And throughout doing that, I had noticed that I had this big buck I called Ocho, just this massive 8 pointer. I mean, I don't want to put a number on him. I'll shoot you pictures of him if I haven't
Mhm.
before. But giant 8 point buck, and he was on the top of the list, along with some of the other bucks I'd scouted out this season. And I'm like, great, I'm gonna go roll around and spend all my time scouting the public land, and then if something pops up on camera on one of these permission properties, I'll go hunt it. Well, eventually through the rut, I noticed that Ocho was showing up about every 3 or 4 days. I'm like,
Okay.
"Okay, so every 3rd or 4th day, he's moving through this property, and he's walking past that mock scrape down there."
When you say rut, what's your time window you're talking? When he started showing up every 3 days, like, what was that 2-week time window when he was doing that?
So this would have been, like, right towards the, last week of November.
Oh,
Last week of
okay.
November, he's so
Yep.
it's later in the rut.
Yeah.
Because my second Missouri tag didn't come in until I think, like, November 15th or something like
Okay.
that.
Yep.
So, I was on a different hunt at the time, and I kept seeing Ocho showing up during that time period too, but I was already out of town. So, when I came back, he was still kinda on this every 3 days, 4 days, he's moving past the camera. So I'm like, "Okay, it's been, this is the 3rd day, I'm gonna go out there and hunt it. He's probably gonna sweep through again." So I did that, and I pop up into a tree on that property, and I'm sitting back and I'm watching that, the property's basically a hill, and he
Okay.
crosses through the bottom of that hill. And, that day, we had a north wind. So I'm like, "All right, perfect, north wind, this is great for my access. He's gonna come right through that bottom. His wind is actually gonna be blowing to me,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna, it's the 3rd day. If he's not here today, he will be tomorrow." So when I popped up in that tree, I'm sitting there for probably a half hour or so, and I hear something crunching like up above me from where I accessed. And I
Mhm.
turn around and look, and it's him. And he's sitting there completely opposite of where he's been passing by that camera every 3 or 4 days. And I'm like, "What the hell?" So I'm trying to turn around. This is already my offside, so I'm trying to get shifted over. He's about 60 yards, and I'm like, if he cruises down, maybe he does a loop that I didn't know about where he starts at the top of the hill and swings down towards the bottom. And he didn't. He cruised right by me at 60 yards, never had a good shot opportunity at him, crests the hill and goes over to the other side. And I sat there and I like kind of the wheels in my head started turning, and so I go pull up my phone after he crests the hill and goes off the other side, and I'm trying to grunt at him. He doesn't care about any of that. And I'm sure he could smell me. He just couldn't see me. So
Mhm.
he stayed up high and just crested. And I looked at my phone, and every single day that he was showing up on the 3rd or 4th day at the bottom of the hill down there, it was on a south wind. So what he was doing was he was making his circles every 3 or 4 days depending on if it was a north wind or south wind, and I wasn't seeing him. He was probably in there almost every day. But
Mhm.
he's able to scent check that mock scrape from a distance the entire time, depending on what side of the hill he's on. So he's on that bottom side of the hill every south wind, and every north wind, he's on the top side. So he never actually had to go down. That was the interesting thing. Probably after October, he stopped hitting that mock scrape.
Mm.
And now he was just, I could see him circling it all the time. He was,
Mhm.
40 yards, 50 yards from it all the time, but he wasn't hitting it himself. And so what I ended up figuring out was every single picture I had of him was on a south wind at the bottom of the hill. And I had a north wind that day, and I didn't even think about the fact that that's not his travel route. That's just how he's traveling based on the wind to scent check that scrape. So when he crested me on the north side, I'm like, those 3 or 4 days in between, I'm sure a lot of them, the wind wasn't preferable for him to be on the bottom side and it wasn't doing him any good. So
Mhm.
that changed the way I looked at how I was setting these cameras up on some of these smaller properties, because that buck was in there who knows how many times. I probably coulda had him on the ground if I woulda paid attention to that way earlier.
Yeah. It's is something interesting about your story is the more I've watched trail cameras and just hunted and hunted out, different states and whatnot, and listened to guys' stories. I've almost come to a belief that for every one trail camera picture you have of an animal, say this buck, that he is in and around a radius of that camera, and this radius could be, let's just call it 100 yards. For every one trail camera picture, I bet you there's 4 to 6 other times he's in and around 100 yards of that trail camera. So you having him like every 3 days, my bet that he was in and around that thing every day. So I gotta ask you, like him, you've seen him up there, he was higher in elevation than you were. And in that moment, like when you watched him do what he did and you're like thinking about the win and stuff where you're like, it makes complete sense what he's doing.
Yeah.
Was that like like right in that instance, like let me ask you this, and it's always hindsight's 2020 because it's hard looking back. If you had no trail camera of knowledge of that place, and you knew for sure that deer lived in and around that area, like do you do you see yourself hunting it completely different that day if you didn't have that trail camera knowledge? Like, but would you have
Yeah, yeah.
what was the chance that you would have put yourself up on top where he was? That I get, hindsight's always 2020, but I think about situations like that a lot.
So almost 100% that if I didn't have a camera in there, I would have hunted higher. And the
Mhm,
reason that, a big part of that is so the property itself is one giant hill. So
mhm,
going into it, I know that the closer I get to the bottom of the hill, the more I'm intruding on the property essentially, because I only have so many yards to go down. It's a small property.
mhm,
So to me, I give myself the best opportunity being as high as possible and being able to see down because that hill, it's hardwood and it's big hardwood. So I can see all the way to the bottom of the creek if I stay up high. The only reason I went down that far was because I know he keeps crossing this
mhm.
little bottom edge of this hill. So I'm like, I want to
Yeah,
be close enough for a shot. And I'm like, oh, I've got his ticket. And then
yeah,
once he crests above me, I was like, "What a freaking idiot." Like, how did I not? Because I should have known better, really.
yeah.
From everything I know about whitetail, from all the hunts I've been on, I know he's gonna want the wind in his face. And
Mhm,
if he's walking by but I just didn't put the pieces together and I got a little bit too married to the camera and I'm like,
mhm.
this is what he does every 3 days, not even paying attention to the conditions of each of those every 3-day cycle he was in. And
Yep.
during that time period, we did have that wind switch all the time because back half of November in Missouri this year, it was, 65 degrees one day, 10 degrees the next day, 65 again. We were back and forth a lot. So we had a ton of wind switching going on and didn't even, I almost get more lax, I feel like, on some of those like small permission properties. I'm
Mhm.
way more lax about how I hunt than I am on public pieces.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I think I kind of something in the back of my head says, well, they're not as pressured. I can maybe get away with a little bit more and that'll lead to me honestly making more mistakes because of that. So
Mhm.
that was something that as soon as it happened, I was like, there you go. This is the bite in your backside that you needed to realize what you're actually dealing with. You're dealing with a mature buck, no matter if it was on a small permission piece or, a big public track that gets a ton of pressure.
Yeah. Well, buddy, I'll tell you this. Is I can tell by listening to the story about him is that it's not a mistake in my eyes. It's maybe a fumble in that situation, but you're learning from it, right? So like
Yeah.
to me, it's not a mistake, man, because it's something that opened up your eyes, and like hopefully that deer survived for you because if he did, boy, it sounds like you got his ticket for next year already, but that's what I always think about with whitetails is, more often than not they beat us, but it's like how many times have I made mistakes that the next 2 or 3 bucks die that get put on the wall because of, well, quote unquote, a mistake or a fumble somewhere along the
Yeah.
way where, we're like a situation like that where it's like, yeah, I might have messed that up, but my next 2 or 3 bucks could end up dying because of a situation that I visually seen or whatever. But, another perfect example of like, if you sat home that day, you would have gone, huh, that's weird. He must be off his pattern today. He must not be in there now because he didn't show up on that trail camera. Or guess what? He was there. he was inside, probably 100 yards of that trail camera. I think that shit happens a lot, dude, a lot.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, and you gotta think too, like, um, and I think a part of it too is the way the property lays out. It's really interesting just how it works, compared to the properties around it, which is something that I've been paying more attention to this year is
Mhm,
like, sometimes I used to have an issue of looking at a property, whether it's public or private, and you get those red lines on the map of the property borders, and
mhm,
I'm like, "Okay, this is the playing field." And I wish there was a feature where I could just shut it off and just, like, and you can get rid of some of those borderlines, but you have to look at how it plays into, everything within a mile or 2
mhm,
because they're there and crossing through there for a reason. And, yeah, that's kinda what I learned about that property in particular was like, okay, they're crossing through here not because it's the easiest route from point A to point B for them. They're passing through here because it's advantageous to them as a thermal hub and the way that the wind moves through that property because it's a sheer hill and it butts up to another one and it sticks right back up and there's a big creek that runs through the middle. So they're actually able to just play that whole area like that. And there's other scrapes in the area that they're able to roll through and scent check and be on top of. Early season, they're there for all the damn acorns. So
mhm.
figuring out how that property plays into effect with the other properties that border it and why the deer are coming from where they're coming from on different days, that was kind of the biggest lesson learned from that property and something that I had to kind of take those blinders off those border lines a little bit on the map.
Yeah. Let me ask you this because I'm guessing you probably, part of the state you live in, you got a lot more hill country and terrain than what I do here in Michigan. And when I hear you talk about like how he travels and stuff, I've seen whitetails here in Michigan, especially the more mature bucks. There'll be times out that they'll even give up the wind just to stay in the cover. They'll transition from cover to cover just to be able to, feel that tightness to them, stay enclosed, a lot of cover, keep them hidden. So when I hear you talk about how that buck traversed that ground, was there a point that when he was up high in elevation, could he to have an actual visual down to that scrape also? Like say if there was a doe family group down in and around that scrape, could he visually see them down there also?
Yeah, he would have been able to visually see them. It would have been, at some point or another as he's
Mhm.
cresting the hill. Now that being said, like there's a ton of deadfall down that way.
Mm.
So, I might be on the first third of that hill approaching the property
Mhm.
and I can't see anything from all the deadfall, but as soon as he crests around the back half of it, then he's able to see basically a straight shot. He can probably see 250, 300 yards, no problem.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
he's got some really open ground because there is no the way that property lays out, there is no vegetation, there's nothing like that. It's all just hardwood and dirt.
Yeah. Did he cut your boot track that day? Like not saying that he smelled it, but did he have to cross over your access to go in there?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. He crossed it. He crossed it. He didn't pay too much mind to it. I saw him stop for a second, and then he just kinda kept on his straight path. He didn't, redirect himself at all, but that is also a part of that property. It's not uncommon for them to be, um, crossing human scent.
Mhm.
But at the same time, they're very wary, and this is something that a lot of people don't believe about, like, permission pieces or, like, quote, unquote, "suburban hunting." Those deer know where people are supposed to be and where they're not supposed to be,
Mm.
and I've been winded on that property before from 150, 200 yards away and had deer blow and run. So
Mhm.
it's not like, you're hunting a suburban permission piece or something like that and the deer don't care. They care, but they know where people can be and where they can't be for them to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the only one in that area that hunts. There are other properties or there are other hunters, nearby, some neighboring properties, stuff like that. So it's it's very interesting because it's a little bit different from the public where like on public land I might have a deer win me from the freaking parking lot or watch me access from a parking lot like I've seen before or whatever, and they're out of there. They might not care if somebody is, on the street up above them, but they do care if somebody's in the woods. They have a different set of boundaries of what they're okay
Mhm.
with.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just stories like that just interest me, because I'm listening. I'm like, oh, it sounds like that buck probably cut his track somewhere, and did he see Dean go in? Did he hear Dean go in? It's a late in November. You talk about no understory, but he still came through there. You know what I mean? Where it's just it's so interesting to me how some of these mature whitetail just like you talked about traverse the ground and because there's been a little bit of sample size I have of hill country. There's been encounters where I'm like, dude, I think that freaking thing was using his eyes more than his nose. Like, I think he
Yeah.
put an importance over what he could smell at times. But then there's other times where I'm like, yeah, he was completely traveling through there for his reasons of his nose, where it's like, man, they're just freaking smart, man. Especially the older they get and the more they're around humans and around danger. But I'll tell you one thing, man, is what's interesting to me about we talk about how they traverse the ground or how they maybe even get away, like that buck's he's give you the slip where it's like the one thing that I have completely changed my tune on from say 10 years ago is, boy, did I used to be that guy that'd be like, dude, he caught your track, he's never going to be around there again. I think a lot differently about how much pressure you can put on a whitetail before they're ever pushed out of that, say, square mile or that county where it's like if I had one blow at me or if I bumped one up scouting, I thought it was over with, but not anymore, man. I think every time they keep surviving an encounter, the more confident they become with it and a little bit more edgy. But boy, I think you can keep pushing the envelope a lot of times with these bucks.
Yeah, I see it through the lens of, like, anytime I get busted, I'm like, "Well, that just proved to them that their system works." You know what I
Hmm.
mean? They didn't tell them that, they got intruded on. It tells them their system worked. So they might be a little bit more hesitant next time they come in, but they're still know that what they're doing or where they're betting is beneficial to them for sure. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you too, because you brought it up a little bit earlier. You've been hunting with the camera guy this last season.
Hmm.
How did that change the way you hunt, if at all? And how did you kind of traverse working with someone else being in the tree with you? Because I can tell you in a few of my instances throughout this season and every year, it feels like I'll get into some trees that there couldn't be a second person in it, no
Hmm.
matter what we do or try, because I've climbed river birches to, 35 foot, and I'm hanging on a tree about that big around. Like, I can basically put my hand around it. So and it'll sway a little bit. It'll be a little sketchy. So when you're hunting with a camera guy, are you now looking at your hunts differently? Are you trying to plan differently and accordingly to having a second person with you? And how does that work for you?
Yeah, man. So this last year was the first year that I've ever had a cameraman with me, and I've been self filming now for the last just a couple years. I haven't been doing it for very long, and I'll be honest, even with the self filming, as the season progresses, I find myself hitting that record button less and less. So like, if I kill something early in October, there's whoever is going to edit it is going to have a lot more footage from me than when I kill something in the middle of November. Like, it just that's reality for me when it comes to self filming and so the first thing that comes to my mind having a cameraman with me this last fall is I felt free, dude. Like, I felt like I could go and I could be me. Like, I didn't have to worry about a GoPro when I was scouting. I didn't have to worry about putting camera gear. I just hunted. Okay. I just hunted.
Yeah.
And the one thing, and there's no doubt, there's always like when you're looking at trees and you get into an area and you think that's how it's going to, how is it going to work for both of us? If it's the tree, it's the frickin' tree, and we have to figure it out. We just have to because, like, there's no doubt, like, when it comes to, a lot of probably how you hunt and how I hunt, like, if it's the spot, it's the spot. We just have to figure it out, and I'll tell you two of the the situations that we dealt with out of state this year because everything I did in Michigan I self filmed myself this year, but Illinois and then Kansas shot bucks in both of those states, and I look back at the tree we shot one in Illinois. I could when I'm standing on the ground I can touch my platform because we're in the only tree that's available to hunt in this system. Okay. and it's got 3 trunks. I'm on 1 trunk, he's on a completely different trunk. I only need a stick, he needs, like, 3 sticks to get up to his, and, like, the whole time, like, we're kinda talking to each other, we're like, "This is the most uncomfortable, mentally tough spot to hunt we've ever hunted." But if that's where we gotta like, that's the one thing I'll give my cameraman Chase so much credit for it is he's like, DJ, if it's the spot we need to be, I will figure it out. If it's a different tree, if it's at the same tree up higher, whatever the case may be. So Illinois had us low, had us real low in this tree, and like we talked about things beforehand where it was like, listen, when one of these bucks that come through this system, when they hit this opening, they're going to be on us. So I knew as a hunter, once I can see his antlers somewhat coming through the brush, I need to make a decision. Are you going to shoot or not shoot? Because you better be at full draw. Because as soon as he crests that opening, he's probably actually even going to turn into us a little bit because he's going to know what in the hell is over there in that tree. And that's exactly what happened in Illinois. But luckily, we were able to pull it off. Then we go out to Kansas and we're hunting this wild hedge apple tree. I mean, just is very old, mature, barely producing any hedge apples anymore. But it was so big that the squirrel had made this giant nest in the bottom of it. Now there was a great spot for the cameraman, a great spot. He was like 3 sticks high, perfect for him. He had branches. Like I was watching him like a couple times. He wasn't even using his platform. He's standing on branches. He's leaned out, nice and comfortable. I stood on a squirrel's nest. I didn't even have a platform, no saddle. I didn't even need any sticks. I just literally climbed right up into this tree where it's basically a big crotch of it. And it was like, if it was the spot, it was the spot. And it was. And our opportunity came on more than one out there in Kansas. But it's honestly, dude, like I'm sure if I hunt with the cameraman long enough, things are gonna go wrong somewhere along the line sooner or
For
later,
sure.
where maybe his leg's in the way and I can't get a shot opportunity, or the maybe we finally do come across a tree that's like, dude, I don't know, but I've watched some other guys film before where it's like, man, I've seen guys set up in like 2 different trees, so I'm very aware of like that. If that situation comes up, like that could be a possibility also. But this year, man, I had a lot of fun doing it. I've never hunted with anybody in my entire life. Like just being up in a tree with 2 guys like that, and me being the hunter and having a cameraman, totally different. But the one thing I'll say is that it just felt freeing, man. I got to hunt. I got to climb. I'd set the tree, pull the bow up, hang it up. We're hunting. Like there, that was it. And it didn't feel like it. I never felt like, "Oh, shit, I gotta get all this shit back out. I gotta pack it up." Like, I didn't have that feeling anymore, and the one thing that was cool is with my cameraman is if I said, "Hey, Chase, we're going to hell today," he'd say, "All right, let me charge up the batteries." Like, you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
know that he's willing to do whatever needs to be done. He's gonna follow me the whole way, and he's a young kid, and he's very rambunctious, willing to learn, driven. So what's interesting though about it, Dean, is I've never had a cameraman, and he's never really filmed hunting until this year. So we're kind of learning together. But we got some exciting, fun stuff planned in the future for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's one thing that I got, over the last 3 years or so. I'd mainly self-film, but then, I'll jump in the tree with Hunter and we film quite a few hunts together at this point now too, and we got a buck
Mhm.
down in October. And there is something super relaxing about it because I know that when I'm self-filming, I'm sitting there like, okay, if I want to be set up 30 minutes before dark, I got to be there like an hour before light or whatever. I got to be there an hour before light, or I got to be there an hour and a half maybe depending on the tree,
Yeah.
and getting all my stuff set up. And then I'll be sitting back in the tree like, man, I didn't see a damn thing this morning. Let me sit for another hour or so because I don't want to pack this stuff up. Like it feels like I just did it. Like it's pretty bad. But when we're hunting together, I'm filling for Hunter. All I have to worry about is the camera gear. All he has to worry about is the hunting stuff. And we got a system down now where he's like, he'll drop his rope down and he's like, just pass your platform up and
Yep.
pass your stuff up, and you'll see what it's like when you get up here. One thing I will say about it, and I've mentioned it before a time or two, Hunting with that guy, he's 6'6", so the discrepancy between the distance of sticks is a little bit overwhelming at times, but I think our, throughout this last few hunts we did together at the end of season here, we were using the Latitude sticks and
Mhm.
Lone Wolf sticks, everything we had in the truck to get up where we were going. We were a solid 40 foot or maybe more. Um,
Oh, shit.
oh yeah, we were up there and oh gosh, those last like that last weekend of season, I think it was Saturday, we had like 35-mile-an-hour gusts, and we're sitting up there, and it was miserable, and we're both looking at each other like, "They ain't gonna move today, are they?" Sure enough, they didn't, and we're like neither one of us wanted to climb back down from that one. But yeah, it's pretty interesting kinda having that system going because you're able to bounce ideas off each other in
Mhm.
real time, and
Yeah.
you're able to work together. And we got some deer down throughout the season doing that. Even the buck I think back to in October. Um, he knows that my eye's buried in the camera and I'm on the deer, and all he's gotta do is shoot, and
Mhm.
then I know that whenever I hear his bow start drawing back, like, "Okay, we're in the moment," because my eye's buried in the camera, I can't see anything around us, I'm focused on the deer, and we're able to work together a lot on those hunts, so I really do enjoy hunting with somebody else in that aspect, but there are some times where you get in there and you're like, "Man, we gotta figure this out because this is a one-man tree and we're fixing to make it a two-man tree." So,
Yeah.
we have to work together a lot like that, and I think it helps you out on some hunts for sure, having
Yeah.
2 people working out a puzzle together, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And we haven't well, in Kansas, this played a big factor for us is he was quite a bit higher than I was, because like I said, I'm standing in this crotch of a tree. I'm maybe 3 foot off the ground, like legit 3 to 4 foot off the ground. And he's probably upwards of, because his platform is at like my head height. So, if I'm, 8 foot, so he's 8, 9 foot off the ground where he had quite the better visual than I did for a lot of time. So this one particular ravine system that he could always see the deer down in there coming up out of there well before I could, which that was really crucial during that hunt because when they did come up out of that ravine, they were kind of walking right towards us. You know what I mean? So like I'm only 3 or 4 foot up, so I'm not that high up. So they have a really good visual. So if he's seen one, I knew it's like, hey, get the bow well before they come up here because we have to be locked in. So that was crucial. But the one thing that I told him on our very first triple. He came out to record the recovery on in the buck I killed in early October in Michigan. But when we jumped in the truck and headed to Illinois for our first ever trip, I told him, I said, dude, I said, we are a team. I says, it's just not me out here in the woods. And he's going like we are going to do a lot of scouting before we ever set foot in a tree or climb up a tree and wherever we go it's going to be like this. I said, so I understand that, like you said, your eyes are going to be locked in on the screen and filming. But I was like, if you see something or if you have an idea, speak up because I'd love to hear it. Yeah, I'd love to hear why like, hey, look at this. Maybe I missed it. Or, hey, DJ, why do you think the deer would go like this? What about this way? Because I always love looking at like the flip side of things. So having another mind there, thinking about things a different way, it may make us pick a tree that's just 14 yards difference, but maybe that's the tree that ends up giving us an opportunity, So
Yeah.
I made sure like went into it very open minded, like, hey, we have two brains out here in the woods. Let's use them both. Let's not just use one of them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that helps you put stuff together 'cause I'll get I know I'll get tunnel vision at times where I feel like
Hmm.
this has gotta be the solution or this has gotta be what we gotta do, and anytime I have somebody with me and they're able to sit there and be like, "Yeah, but did you consider this, or did you
Yes.
consider X, Y, or Z?" And then it forces me to rethink the situation, so and I think it's benefited a ton on some of those hunts.
Yep.
When you're out there and you got a camera guy with you now, you got Chase, rolling in your hunts with you, and your hunts are going to be on grit, and you're working on all this stuff. Does that add any pressure for you? Did that ever get into your head at all when you were out there and chasing deer and being like, man, I'm trying to get, I'm trying to enjoy the hunt, but I'm also trying to get a deer down so that we have this. because I got somebody that came all this way with me and they're doing all this stuff for me, and, maybe things are getting tough. Did that ever get into your head at all or add pressure to you?
Yeah, that's a simple answer for me. It's absolutely not, dude. Zero pressure for me. And I've always, let me see if I can explain this correctly. Um, I learned back around 2019. There's something that happened in 2019 that I learned very easily for myself, that hunting was for me and me only, and it is not for anyone else. Okay, my style of hunting, right? I don't care if someone likes my style of hunting. I don't care if they hate my style of hunting. It doesn't bother me if they think that's the best way or that's the worst way. I only hunt for myself and myself only. Okay, because here's the reality: if Chase wasn't there with me, those exact same trips and those exact same hunts would happen, because why? They were already happening well before a cameraman. So having in him and I have had this discussion too, and he knows it also. I will take my opportunity whether that camera's on or off. Like there's no difference for me at all. But like when I lost my care for what people thought when it comes to what animals I kill or how I kill or my methods of hunting. When I lost that years ago, dude, there's zero pressure. Like I've long thought about this. Now, I can understand. I've heard guys talk about the pressure, and maybe they do that for a living, and maybe putting food on the table changes that feeling. Where hunting is not a living for me, so I I've often thought about this, and I could be very wrong saying this in some sense because, like I said, some guys, the way they put food on the table is from hunting. But I've often thought about, Dean, that like if you feel pressure hunting to like kill something, I've often thought that maybe that, like, if you're feeling that, maybe you should take a step back and really ask yourself, like, why are you doing this? And are you having fun doing this? Because, like, if I ever felt pressure, boy, one, like, if I ever told my wife, I'm like, "Man, I feel pressure," she'd be like, "Then you're not doing it for the right reasons then, DJ." She would tell me that. I know she would. So dude, no pressure at all. Like, feeling a
That's
tag, not
awesome.
feeling a tag, I don't feel that at all. But like I said, that came with maturity though also. Like, and not to get into the weeds, but basically in 2019, why I say that change is my daughter and I were in a very, very bad accident, and I didn't know if I'd ever hunt a single day of my life again. So when that time came rolled around that I was able to actually start hunting again, I had zero care of what anyone else thought about. I didn't care if anyone's seen anything like that at all. Whereas like this is for me. Like I'm hunting just for myself. And I'm still that way, and now that the only thing that's really changed when I say what people caring about things is I share a lot of things because I find value in people wanting to learn. But outside of like feeling pressured to like kill an animal, no chance, dude. No chance at all.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and that's the best way to go about it, and I think that's why so many people do resonate with you, because you
Mhm.
are in this unique spot where you are, involved in hunting media, and you got the method, and you can be seen on Grit and all this other stuff, but it's not, it's not a do or die situation. It's 100% love of the game that you're
Mhm.
out there. And you brought up your daughter there and your wife and talking to them about your hunting and all this. And one thing that I always admire a lot about your social media and about your presence there is, man, if people come to you for hunting stuff, they'll find hunting stuff, but they're also gonna see you posting about your family, about your
Mhm.
daughter's accomplishments, about, your wife and all this, and you really exude, being a family man first, which I think is awesome to see because you can go to a lot of hunting pages, a lot of guys that are in hunting media, and that's mainly all you see. But for
Mhm.
you, it's a ton of family. And you actually have a post up on your Instagram too of a note your daughter wrote you on your way
Mhm.
out to a trip and a bunch of other stuff like that. How did that develop? Have you always been that way, or it was you kind of stuck it through, or was there moments where you kind of wrestled with the passion for hunting and all the traveling you do, and
Mhm.
then your responsibilities as a family man?
Man, it's never been an issue for me to be a family man first. That never has. And For anyone that, maybe they're just coming across some of my stuff of with hunting or, whatever that is, um, when you bring up traveling, dude, I just started traveling over the last couple of years because I to give you a little bit of background, like my wife and I, we got married young and we had kids at a very young age, but that's something we both wanted. And, I can remember back when I grew up hunting my whole life, hunted ever since I was a kid. And for some reason, somewhere around 2012, I got, I got, something struck with me that I was like, man, I want to kill bigger deer. Well, you know, in 2012, I had a 4-year-old and I had a newborn on the way, and it was like, okay, you're not gonna be able to travel hunt. But I knew what travel hunting was back then. Like I knew guys were doing that. I knew there was a lot better states if you wanted a different caliber of deer, say than my own home state of Michigan. But I knew I wasn't gonna be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave you with a 4-year-old and a newborn at home."
Yeah.
Funds were a lot different back then, and, so I back then, I had to figure out how to kill big deer in Michigan, and then that's kinda what I set out to do. Now, why I'm bringing this up is that is probably there's a time period between 2012 to probably 2018, so maybe not that far, but there's a few years in there when I wasn't struggling being a good family man. What I was struggling with, Dean, was I would have FOMO like no other. And what I meant by that is I had a fear of missing out with how much time I was spending in the woods. I thought I had to be out there all the time because that's what I was seeing other people do. And this is before like social media. Like this is like hunting forums and guys that were really killing big high caliber animals with archery equipment. And the thing that I think I got FOMO with is that in Michigan, like I had kind of thought I'd only have one opportunity a year. So you better be out there all the time. And it wasn't that I wasn't being present in my home life. What the FOMO brought on was I would honestly become a bit of an asshole when I couldn't go hunting. When it was we were going over to, grandpa and grandma's for a family dinner, I'd be like, dude, well that's not gonna work because I want to go hunting. Where my family was starting to see a little bit of, like an asshole because I couldn't go do something. Like that it was kind of childish, honestly. And somewhere along the lines, I don't know, dude. I don't know if I talked to somebody or I can't remember what exactly made me flip a switch, but it maybe it was 2019 when we got in that accident. I don't know. There's a time period that I basically told myself that this can't be a numbers game. We can't just kill a big buck because I started killing some big deer in Michigan in 2012. Like it was starting, things were starting to roll. But it was like, was I killing them just out of sheer time in the woods? Like, I was questioning that, and I said, "I gotta become more efficient. How can I be more efficient with my family life, but still chase this passion of mine, still wanna really kill, like, a higher end animals here in Michigan? Like, how could I kill that real like, that top 3% of bucks that in my home state?" And then I really started to ramp up the scouting more. And with that, I could do that. I could scout a lot compared to how I hunted because of this is well, the kids are in school and the wife's at work. I have 2 hours. So boom, I'll go hit 2 hours of scouting and it had to be a real planned out in my head how I'm going to scout. And I started doing that, and I do that all the time, and it was never saying, "Hey, do you guys care if I go out all day scouting? Like, I like to go out for 8 hours." No, those days went away. I started picking these little windows like, "Oh, they're at dance practice," and my wife's, she's got a couple of hair clients tonight. Boom, I'll go scouting, and maybe I have to go do it in the dark, and whatever the case may be, where I started finding these little pockets of windows to be able to go do a lot more scouting. And the more scouting I was putting in, Dean, the more efficient my falls were becoming. And I'll never forget this. A couple years ago, probably like 2020, 2021, somewhere in there. My wife says one day, she says, man, she goes, you know what's interesting? She goes, over the years, the less you hunt, the more big bucks you kill, and but she knows how much, like, she knows I'm going out scouting when she's at work or wherever the case may be, but she's right. I've become way more efficient with my time, where, like, if I had to put a ratio on the time of scouting compared to hunting, it's not even close. Where, like, in Michigan this year, I got to hunt 4 days this year, but the amount of time scouting going into those 4 days is a lot. But my family didn't really see that because they were busy, right? They were busy
Yeah,
doing things. They see me hunting. But the one thing I can tell you though is just being present at home has changed a lot for hunting, because now they're over the last couple of years, my kids have become older, right? My oldest daughter, she's almost 18 now. So, when she was able to start driving, like, my home life I didn't have as many, I don't want to say responsibilities, but I didn't have to run them to school or pick them up from school, or where then the travel hunting kind of came about, right? Then all of a sudden I could travel hunt. So, for anyone listening, remember, like, I didn't travel hunt. So I'm 40 right now. I never really started travel hunting until I was 35, 36 years old. That's when I first started ever doing it. But not being able to do that forced me to learn how to kill bigger deer in Michigan, because I knew what I wanted to do, but I had to figure out a way to do it on my home turf. So the travel hunting is very new, and you bring up that letter that my youngest daughter wrote, and that started in 2021. It was I had located a really big deer in Michigan, and I mean, just uh, deer you usually don't find in Michigan. And for reference, the deer was almost 160 inches. He's like 158 and change. And those deer they just don't come often around here, if ever, for a lot of people. Well, yeah, I was hunting this deer, Dean. I was hunting this deer, and I was on like my seventh sit for this deer, and I'd woke up, and by the coffee pot was this note, and this was 2021, so this was, what, 5 years ago. So Baylor would, she's 13 now, so she's 8, somewhere around 8 years old, and penmanship ain't the greatest, and she writes this note, and it says, "Hey, I called that deer rib cage because his one side of his rack is just all his tines curled in, look like a human rib cage." And she's 8, remind you, and it says, "Hey, Dad, go kill a rib cage, or go get," and somewhere along that line, she put, "Go kill that big ass buck." She writes it at 8, right? Well, that day I killed that deer, and I'll never forget. I had the note with me in my pocket, because I see it, I was like, "Oh, dude, this got it," and it's just up on a ripped up piece of notepad paper, and I put it on my pant on my knee, and you can see like the light of knock down there, and I just took a picture of it like that, and it's always like, and I had it laminated, because I was like, dude, how cool was that? And what's wild, okay, is those notes don't come all the time, right? Like, I'm like, Bailey, you need to write me a note every day of hunting season, like every day. Like, well, those notes don't come all the time. And since then, she's wrote them on one, two, three, four. And I had to go look because I save them all. Like four different times. And now I haven't seen another one in a note for a Michigan hunt. So they've come on my out of state hunts. But every time she's wrote a note, I've shot a buck. So it's like, and
you're
people have
batting a
started
thousand with the notes.
right. People have started like picking up on it. And I've had a few guys reach out. They're like, what's the chance she'd like to sell a note or anything? Like, I'll, I'll never forget, like, people were kind of starting to notice, like, every time I'd post a note like that, I'm head out on a trip, and then I'd post a picture of the deer, and the note would be sitting there. And then one of the trips I'll never forget, I just put a picture of the note on there, and like the first comment, the guy's like, "Dude, go ahead and notch your tag. The buck's dead now." And it was like, no, no way. And then that next day, I ended up killing a deer. So that's where the note thing comes from. But man, I just appreciate what you said there, just about being a family man. And, because at the end of the day, like, this is going to be a day down the road that my body or whatever, I probably won't be able to hunt anymore someday down the road, but, my family will always be there. And then, having them be able to go out on track jobs like that, and that's really important. But as much as they support me, I support them too. So that's why you don't get just hunting bullshit from me, is because like they're doing things that take a process in life too, and they pour everything they have into things just like I do, right? So I support them, they support me. It's just what we do, So that's important to me, but it's never been a hard struggle for me to balance, other than that, there's a couple year period that I had FOMO. I sensed it. I felt like I listen, when your wife is telling you like, dude, you're being an asshole because you can't go hunting for a day. That's something that's, 3 months long here in Michigan. Like, dude, you need to grow up, and I took that to heart, man, and for anyone that, like, I hear guys that say, "Man, I got a little one on the way, hunting may change," or I'm like, "Yeah, you may be surprised though, because it may make you more efficient than what you think you were efficient, because in reality, in 2012, if I was hunting 30 or 40 days a year to kill one buck, those numbers are changed now. So and to me, like that methodical efficiency, like I love that part of it too. But don't make any mistake. There's a lot of time being spent scouting, or even if that's e-scouting from home, or sending permission letters. Like that's all hunting for me. But there's a lot of things I can do that don't take away from necessarily, time away from the family.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and man, I gotta tell you, because it's one of those things that I pick up on, and like I said, that I admire about you and your page is that you're involved like that, and it's not all hunting stuff. It is
Mhm.
you showing that you're putting family first, and that's a lot of things that I wanna keep in mind, whenever I get to that point in life. Like, right now, I look at that and I'm like, "Man, that's gotta be crazy." Because 'cause I'm 24 and, I don't have kids, I don't have nothing like that, so I'm sitting there and, I remember in college, the freshman year, I talked about this not too long ago. I spent, like, 200 something days that year in the woods. I was in the
Yeah.
woods more than I was in class. Like, I was, tagged out on deer, so I'm duck hunting. Duck hunting
Yep.
season ended, I'm coyote hunting. You couldn't get me out of the woods. And, a full-time job slows that down a little bit, but man, I'm still pushing an embarrassing amount of days in the field compared to, yeah, I've got some good bucks on the wall, but if you added up the amount of days I've been in the field, they don't add up, you know?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things I can't, I'm so addicted to being out there
Yeah.
that I'm like, I always sit back and I wonder, like, what's that gonna be like later on? And so
Mhm.
I've always seen you as a great example of that, still
Man,
going out there, still doing that stuff, but being efficient, killing big deer, being involved in hunting media, but knowing to balance it properly and keep life aligned with it. I find it very, very admirable from you.
yeah, I really appreciate those words, man. They do truly mean a lot to me. And I'll say one more thing about that, about that kind of these comments about being efficient and whatnot. Is this is another thing that really opened up my eyes to it. And it may not be for everyone, especially when it comes to style and maybe the type of ground you're hunting, or it's everything a hunt is not, knock on door permission, or public land. So when I talk about trying to be efficient and not having a lot of times, like every hunt's extremely aggressive, and I'm okay with, like I always tell people, one or two things are going to happen here. I'm going to kill that animal that night, or he's going to know I was hunting him, and I'm okay with either one of those. You know what I mean? But so like, and if I had a lot of time to hunt, maybe my style would be different. Maybe I'd be, man, I got to hunt him from the outside in. I can't, like, he's not, what I say, he's not quote unquote killable right now. Maybe I'll observe, or I'm like, no, every time I get to hunt, I gotta treat it as in like, hey, I get to hunt, I have to go kill him tonight. Let's figure it out. So it's a very aggressive style of hunting, but it's what I found, where it's, looking back at all the years of since basically 2012, that's kind of always the chapter one of wanting to kill bigger deer for me. I look back, it's like, man, I'm so much more aggressive today than I was back then. But I always had this thought back then. I was like, man, you're only going to get one opportunity. You can't screw this up. You gotta tippy toe. You gotta do it right. You gotta wait for the right dates on the calendar. Where now it's like, dude, you give me an opportunity to hunt. I don't matter the day on the calendar, the weather. We are going to try to kill one, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that aggressive style. That is very much up my alley. That buck I killed this year in September, I had to have just when I look back at it and I look at the timing and where it came from exactly and where I shot him, on my way in, I had to have passed by him at
Mhm,
less than 100 yards for sure. And then, the very next weekend, I go out with Hunter and we pop up in a tree and we are 55 to 60 yards away from the buck in his bed when we were
mhm,
about to kill him. And, that style has just always been the most effective way for me. Yeah, maybe we screw it up sometimes, but we're going out in the woods and we're kicking in bedroom doors and we're just going in there. We're going for it. So
mhm.
that's
I
been
like that.
that changes everything for sure. I do want to ask you this. We get into the end of season here. I always take a minute to just review my season. I basically give myself a report card, like what did I do wrong? What did I do right? One of the things that stuck out to me this year that I did wrong was I had it in my head that I'm going out of state if I punch my Missouri tag in September, and I did that, and then I didn't go out of state. I let myself almost get into my head too much, like, "Man, if you
Mhm.
can't fill both tags in Missouri this year, then what business do I have going to another state?" I shouldn't have done that. But I also take this off season to go do some competition archery and stay sharp. What's your off season look like coming in off of your very successful deer season and everything that you've had going on? What are you, planning for next year, and what are you, kinda putting in order? Do you shoot some competition, or how do you stay sharp?
Well, my season ended when I came home from Kansas this year, which was at the end of November. And yeah, I still had a Michigan tag because here in Michigan we get 2 buck tags. I still had a Michigan tag in my pocket. And I could have hunted all the way to January 1. Our season closes, but I never hunted Michigan again just because of I killed a big deer in Michigan that I was completely content if that was the one deer I killed this year, and then coming off of an Illinois trip, a Kansas trip. I knew, like we talked about the whole family thing. Once those quote unquote rut trips are over with, that's it for me, man. It's once December hits, I can't even tell you the last time I've actually hunted like the month of December, especially in my home state here, man. It's been years. It's because the family's allowed me to go chase, those October or September, October, or November whitetail, so I'm good with that. But going into so as we record this, it's mid-January now, and I've already got a few days of scouting in under my belt. Been pulling some Silker SD card cameras of some potential new places I'd like to hunt in the future in Michigan. But I'll continue to scout, man, and I'm probably gonna make some out of state scouting trips this year. Get some cool plans ahead. But I'll tell you about staying sharp. So I shot a buck in Kansas this year on November 16th, and it was the third buck this year, and it was the easiest shot out of all of them. And I felt myself. I shot a buck October 8th, made a great shot. Shot a buck October 29th, made a really great shot. And then shot a buck November 16th on a not so great shot. And like I said, it was the easiest one out of all three. And I felt myself slip back into something that day where it was good enough, good enough. And there was a period around 2018, 19, and 20 particularly that I had a hard time slowing a situation down when it come to archery. And when that shot broke in Kansas that day, I knew I felt that situation kind of come back. So when I got home from Kansas, not the saying like it's everyone's fix, but I know it's personally my fix. When I got home from Kansas that day, I brought the targets back into I can shoot down here in the basement, and I got my hinge release back out that I used to shoot back in when had that issue before coming off of my 2020 season. I recognize I'm like, you gotta slow the moment down. We're not missing deer. We're just off. And you have to slow that moment down. And I realized that there's a mistake made in Kansas, that I personally made a mistake, not my equipment, me myself saying, hey, good enough, and kind of probably hurried the shot up. Shot was just a tad bit off from being a really great shot. But I know there's something to be worked on, and I kinda like that. I kinda like having, an issue to work on in the off season. So I got the hinge release back out. That's my way of fixing things. And dude, what's so interesting is, even I've been hunting with a thumb button for the last couple of years. I get that hinge back out, and it's just like riding a bike, man. It's start shooting it again, and it's instantly eye opening how much freaking better I shoot with that thing. It
Yep.
truly is. And even this isn't a controlled environment in the basement. It's like 13 yards, you know what I mean? But still, it's like we're not hitting just kind of in the circle. We just keep punching the same hole in the target. You know, it's like, man, it's because I hunted, we talked about that big deer I killed in 21 with the when Bailey first wrote that note, that letter, is I was hunting with the hinge back then, and I was making some of my best shots I've made, and then about 2 years into it, I said, I'll try a thumb button, and kind of started liking that, and there's a good chance I go back to hunting with that hinge, but I'll keep working with that. I want to put a lot of emphasis on shooting this year. I've never shot any like competition archery or anything, but just invest in myself with shooting and just slowing down those moments and then just scouting, man. It's unfortunately right now in freaking Michigan, it's so freaking cold out right now. You can hear I'm probably pretty mad that, because like I said, this is the time of year where it's time to shine for me, and I don't get me wrong, I love picking up sheds just as much as the next guy, but I will not wait to go walk around just for sheds to start dropping. It's time to scout. It's time to go read the sign that was laid, read how the ground flows, all of that stuff. Check out new pieces, but that'll be what I do in the off season is do that, shoot, just every day, usually about 5 days a week in the gym, just the normal routine that I like to run, man. It's where I'm a very like scheduled person, so there's X things I do each day. Um, During those times, I try not to, like I said, even like when it comes to the gym or the shooting, like I don't take time away from the family during those. They don't see that very much, so it's that's what I'll do in the next off season to stay sharp. To plan on 2 out-of-state trips this next fall, and we'll see. Maybe a third comes along the way. The wife said the other day, which, hey, speaking of a camera guy, this is where maybe out of all the things, yeah, we shot 2 bucks this year, but having a camera guy maybe played the biggest part. My camera guy was here as we're getting ready to leave for a trip, and he's just recording some shit around the house or whatever. And my wife said something, from the other room. She's like, we were talking about trips, and she's like, why don't you go on a third state? And I'm like, look at the camera guys, like, you got that on film, right? Because it's not gonna be used on grip, but we're gonna use it for blackmail next year
Yeah.
for sure.
Heck
uh,
yeah. That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the hinge. I've been hunting and shooting like my competition season and my hunting season. I've been running a hinge exclusively, and it's actually on that I'm running the True Ball Goat.
Okay.
And, that goat release, I can switch it from a thumb button or a hinge, and I've just
Mm,
never switched it to a thumb button
yeah.
because I found my groups, doing this to that, like to a
Yeah.
golf ball size with a hinge, and I'm like, there's no reason." So I never did, and I have noticed that I've made some of my best shots on whitetails with that hinge, and
Mhm.
I'm so comfortable with it now and used to it that that's what I wanna run. I have wondered if I'm ever gonna run into a situation where maybe I've gotta break a shot immediately, and I'm running a hinge, and I really don't wanna punch the hinge, but I've always wondered if I'm ever gonna be in that situation where maybe I would've been served better by a thumb button or something like that, but
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet, fingers crossed, hopefully it stays that way, but that's been my experience with the hinge so far. I think it's been a big, big plus to my game overall.
Yeah.
And, are you able to say what states are in mind right now as to, where you're wanting to go for next year?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I'm probably cashing in my Iowa points. I haven't been out there since 2020, so I've been piling up some Iowa points there, and gonna probably go. I mean, should draw that now. I'm sitting on 5 points, so go back out there, and that's probably where I plan on taking a couple trips out there this spring. And well, dude, I'll be honest. As soon as the weather looks like it may warm up, I'm not. I'll go. Like, if even if it's go scout for 48 hours and come back home, that's fine. Waited a long time. One of my really good buddies, him and I hunted Iowa in 2020, and we haven't really got to hunt much together since then. So I'm really looking forward to getting back in camp there. Got the Airbnbs already booked for it, and just getting back out there and seeing that. And I'll probably go try Illinois this year again. And I've been out there twice. I've hunted two different areas, and probably just knowing my fashion, I'll probably go find a third new area to go try. But that's a good one too, just because it's not too long of a drive, And then a third one, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's because I'll probably split those up between October and November, and just with the way the family life works. My oldest daughter be head off to college, so that's going to be a little bit different. We'll have to see exactly what her schedule is. So maybe something on the front or back end. Maybe it's something in September, or maybe something in January. I don't know. Time will tell. But yeah, so it's exciting time ahead. We'll see what we got in Michigan. See what shows up, maybe hopefully some of these deer make a good jump and have some good bucks to chase here in my home state too, because that's nice too, to be able to sprinkle in some home stuff, when I'm not on the road hunting.
For sure, for sure. Well, DJ, I gotta ask you. I always ask everybody that comes on, if you had one piece of advice, hunting related, archery related, or otherwise, what would be your one piece of advice to anybody that's out there listening to this right now that you can personally speak on? Maybe it's something that affected you differently.
Yeah. So we're actually going to circle right back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. Is just hunt for yourself, nobody else. Like don't worry about what you see on social media or on YouTube or on the outdoor channel. Nothing like that, man. Just truly hunt for the reasons why you love and to hunt. The fun in it, why you like to chase a certain animal, why you like to use a certain weapon. Just truly do it for yourself. And also, if I'm going to grab two of them because we talked about this one also, is just always be a student of the game, man, because I think there's so much good knowledge out there to be had. And if you're open to it, man, and just be a sponge, you combine those two things, hunting for yourself, creating your own method of hunting, and then being a student of the game, dude, you'll become a killer. It'll happen.
For sure, for sure. I couldn't agree more with that. I love that. It's really easy to hop on Instagram or Facebook or wherever else and hear all the negative stuff about the ways different people are hunting or the way
Hmm.
everybody's doing things or whatever. But just because that's out there to consume doesn't mean that that's what's best for you to consume. There's always better content out there, better people that are
Hmm.
kind of spreading a better message. And if you're out there and you're having fun and you're learning something, then it ain't hurting nothing. So that's a really solid piece of advice and something that can be easy to fall into the rabbit hole of the negative echo chamber there. But if you get out of it and you're doing it for you, you're gonna
Hmm.
have a lot more fun that way. So, DJ, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing the last hour and a half or so with me, and good luck this next season. Hopefully, we'll stay in touch there, and we'll see what's going on. Hopefully, we'll both have finding some success out there, and I'll run some out of state plans by you at some point, I'm sure, so I can finally button that down and figure out what I want to do. So thank you guys for listening. DJ buddy, thanks again and I'll see you.
See you, buddy. Thanks again.
Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Non-Typical Project. If you want to check out our special guest, their social media handles are located in the episode description. If you want to keep up to date with the Non-Typical Project, you can search the Non-Typical Project on Instagram. You can also head over to the main page of the podcast to see all currently available episodes with a new episode every Friday. To keep up to date with me, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Dean_Hunts. And everything will once again be down below in the episode description. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.